Assalamu alaikum. Truly, peace be upon you, my dear viewer. I've thoroughly enjoyed the months that I've spent living in Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, and the shorter visits I've made in Jordan, Iran, Afghanistan, Malaysia, Indonesia. I love the Muslim friends that I've made around the world in Muslim countries and Western countries. So please understand, if you see here a video entitled something like "The Quran is Unimpressive," this is not coming from a place of hate. I know there's plenty of anti Islamic hate in the world, especially on the internet. And that's not where I'm coming from. My intent is not to bash Muslims or tear down Islamic societies or to be disrespectful of the long and rich history of the Islamic world. My intent certainly is not political. If you look at other videos on my channel, you'll see that I talk about the demonic power behind Christian nations. I am a follower of Jesus, but the Jesus in the Bible did not talk about making Christian countries. He talked about something called the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven and taught his people how to live as strangers in this world until he comes back to establish his kingdom. But in the meantime, his people are, his true followers are a scattered remnant of a minority of strangers in this world. Nothing about Christian countries. So my goal is not to stop immigration or promote one side of global international affairs over another. No, my concern is spiritual, eternal, the worship of God, the destiny of our souls. That's what I care about. And on that point, here's an analogy. I've asked a number of Muslim friends over the decades that I've been interacting in interreligious dialogue. I've said, "Do you believe that I'm headed towards hellfire, given that as a follower of Isa Masih, Jesus Christ, I say that he is the Son of God? If I continue in that until the day of my death, whether that be sooner or later, inshallah, whenever it shall come, if I have continued in saying that Jesus is the Son of God to the point of my death, though I go to hellfire?" And my Muslim friends respond very straightforwardly, "Of course, absolutely, you go to hellfire." And indeed, what else could my Muslim friends say? If you believe in traditional Islamic theology, there's no other answer. If you are a traditional Muslim and believe that shirk is the unforgivable sin, and that to say that Jesus is the Son of God is to associate a partners with God, and the straightforward conclusion is that the consequence of this belief is hellfire. What good would it do for my Muslim friend to hem and haw or lie or sugarcoat the truth or avoid it and say, "Well, I don't know, maybe there's some way you'll be okay," and then to walk away from that conversation and say, "Man, Zechariah sure is going to hellfire for saying Jesus is the Son of God." There's no use in that. There's no love in that. To say that you're going to hellfire is a warning. Nobody wants to be told that they're headed towards hellfire. But that's exactly the point, is that discomfort, then my Muslim friend is hoping that discomfort will cause me to reevaluate my belief system and consider that I may be wrong. And indeed, hopefully, from their perspective, I will change my views. I will embrace Islam. I will say the Shahada. I will become a Muslim, and I will end up avoiding hellfire. So this is the saying the truth, that your present belief system is on a trajectory towards hellfire, is a word of love. Now, likewise, by analogy, conversely, if I see that my Muslim friend is entrusting their current life path and their pathway to enter into the hereafter and paradise, they're trusting this book, the Quran, to teach them the will, the mind, the truth of Allah on how to live this life and how to enter paradise. And if I have, as I have, if I've read the Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures, and the Islamic scriptures, if I've read the Torah, Zabur, Injil, and Quran. And if I believe if I have seen the Jewish scriptures and the Christian scriptures as we have them today to be the Word of God, and if the Quran strikes me as not the divine, miraculous Word of God, not even an impressive book at all, then what else can I say than to tell my Muslim friend the truth? What good will it do? What love will there be in any other answer other than the truth? Prophet Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Truth is the path towards freedom. So I testify to what I have seen. There's nothing else I can do. But even still, both my Muslim and my Christian friends will push back and say, Zakaria, what's the need to be negative? Let's focus on the positive. Don't say bad things about the other religion or about their holy books. Focus on the positive message. And I love to focus on the positive message, and I do focus on the positive message, and I'm much more interested and wish that we could do that all day long. I want to talk about the fact that throughout the scriptures, from the Torah through the Injil, God has always required a substitutionary sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins. Even my Muslim friends have some semblance of awareness of this in the Eid al-Korban, when God provided a substitutionary sacrifice in place of the death of his son. Throughout the Torah, Jews would sacrifice a lamb at the temple, and the blood being sprinkled on the altar would cover over the record of their sins. And so then when you get to the Injil, and Yahya, John the Baptist, looks at Jesus and says, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world," because he died on the cross, shed his perfect blood, and defeated death through his resurrection. That's why the Son of God can die, is because that gives him the opportunity to defeat death and to come back to life and show that he is a victor over death, that it could not hold him. I would love to talk about that all day long. And yet, what happens in Islamic Christian dialogue is that, of course, my Muslim friend will object that the Bible has been corrupted, and we can talk about reasons, evidence why I don't think it's been corrupted, and in fact, why I think the Quran itself and early Islam, Muhammad himself, encouraged the early Muslims to talk to the people of the book, to go check the scriptures, the Torah, Zabur, and Injil, check that, confirm Muhammad's prophethood through those earlier holy books. We could talk about that, but ultimately we often get to a point where my Muslim friend's ultimate trump card is that the Quran is the final revelation. Any of the holy books before, any truth in them has been summarized and brought together in the Quran. Any truth that wasn't revealed is now shown in its fullness, and the Quran is the apex of perfection. It's all we need, supersedes everything that came before. And so even if your corrupt Christian Bible has some seeds of some verses of truth in it, we don't need that. Even if we could pick out some parts that may be true, because the Quran is the final package, has everything we need. Now, now again, I have read the Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures, the Islamic scriptures, and have seen, my testimony is that what my eyes have seen is that God speaks through the Torah, Zabur, Injil, through the Christian Bible, the Jewish Bible, and that God does not speak through the Quran. That is my testimony. And if my Muslim friend is ever going to hear the true word of God, they will need at some point to be open to the possibility that the Quran is not the final word. And there is a sharp aura of fear, a stigma, a great cloud of fear in Islamic society against questioning the Quran in any way. And so if my Muslim friend is ever going to hear what I think that They need to hear the words of life found in the Bible, the words of life found in the Jewish and Christian scriptures. They will somehow, by God's grace, need to pierce through that cloud of fear. And so, if my testimony that I've read all of these books and God does speak through the Torah, Zabur, and Injil, through the Jewish and Christian scriptures, and the Quran just is not, I'm sorry to say, it's just not the Word of God. It's not even an impressive book on any level. If my testimony can spur one Muslim friend to break through and hear what I believe to be the true message of God, then I'm willing to face whatever consequences there are as I live out my years in Muslim countries, having given this testimony and the dangers that accompany that. Because it's worth it if you, my Muslim friend, can come to hear the true words of life. Well, with that introduction, let me talk about why I think the Quran is not an impressive book. And the first thing is that even to call the Quran a book, I feel like we're already being generous because, well, it certainly is a collection of surahs, and certainly those surahs are traditionally bound together in a single volume called the Quran, that is one book. So, in that sense, of course, I don't deny that it's a book, but I would expect that if you take a this material found in the multiple different recitations that came to Muhammad and you compiled them together, that there would be some order or structure to the collection. And what do we have? To be honest, this is the first thing that struck me and surprised me the first time that I read the Quran, and you'll see more why when we go and see the way the Bible works. But going through, there's no discernible pattern from one surah to the next. Now, certainly Al-Fatiha, the opening, is an opening prayer and dedication to that Allah would lead us and guide us in the right path. But after that, as Muslim listeners probably know, the surahs are sorted simply by the the longest ones generally coming first, and then as you get towards the end, middle, they're getting shorter, and then towards the end, you have some of the shortest surahs with only 4 ayahs. Um, and so is there some other meaning and structure here? Well, if we what order were they revealed in? What order did they come to Muhammad in? And there's going to be a matter of debate amongst Muslim scholars, but um, there's the Meccan and Medinan surahs are intermixed with. It's not that the first half is Meccan and the second half is Medinan, or the other way around. It's they're intermixed together, and so a sample chronological ordering of the order that the surahs were revealed. Here we've got first is Alaq 96, Al Qalam 68, Surah 73, 74, Surah 1, 111, 81, 87, 92. It's a hodgepodge of random sorted numbers, and we got all the Meccan surahs until we get around to about the 87th, and then we start hitting the Medinan surahs from Al-Baqarah um, onward. But again, it's 2, 8, 3, 33, 64, and the last one being on Nasr, the divine support, Surah 1, 110. So they weren't, the order that they were revealed is very different from the order that they're set forth in the Quran. So the Quran doesn't give us a meaningful ordering in that sense. Is there some other way that they're structured and flow together? This is where I was honestly just surprised the first time that I read the Quran. Again, you'll see why in a minute. I was expecting, okay, somewhere near the beginning, we'll have the story of the beginning, the creation of the world, Adam, whatnot. Well, if you go looking for Adam in the Quran, You'll find a bit about him in Al-Baqarah, Surah 2. So in verse 31, he taught Adam the names of all things, and then you've got a good 10 ayat on Adam and what was happening in the early stages there, and then that drops off, and we're talking to the children of Israel and reminding them of the laws and Salah and Zakat, the laws of Israel. This is thousands of years later after Adam, and we're talking about, oh Israel, guard yourselves against the day. And there's, I think Moses shows up here. This is a couple thousand years after Adam. Well, we've dropped Adam was there for 10 verses and dropped out of the picture. He shows back up again in Surah 7. Allah said, O Adam, live with your wife in paradise, eat from wherever you please, do not approach this particular tree. We've got a few verses on Adam and his wife and the trees in paradise, and then it drops off to talk about something else. Same sort of pattern. You know how it goes if you're familiar with the Quran. Surah 15, we've got again a mention of God creating a human being, fashioned him from the clay, and told all the angels to bow down to him, but Iblis refused to bow down. We've got a good dozen verses on that until we move on to some other subject in Surah 15. Then we can find a little bit more about Adam in Surah 20. Satan whispered to him, O Adam, shall show you the tree of immorality in a kingdom that does not fade away. Same sort of thing. Few verses about the origins of humanity, and then we move on to something else. In Surah 38, we're talking about various warnings, and then Adam pops in, and we're told that God's going to create a human being from clay. And again, the part about the angels being told to bow down to him, and Iblis doesn't want to bow down. We've got a few verses that involve paradise, and then now we've hit the end of that surah, and we go on to Surah 38, and that's completely different topic, different point in Revelation, unrelated. So just at the very big picture level overview, the Quran doesn't have the structure that I would normally expect of a book that I would read, anything from a storybook to a math textbook. Either the story or the ideas will progress from the first chapter to the last chapter, building up on what has come before to reach an ultimate conclusion. And I don't see that in the Quran. Whereas with the Bible, and we can call this the miracle of the Bible, if you've never looked at a Bible before, is that you can actually read it as an actual book. Either download an YouVersion is a good Bible app that has various translations of the Bible in various languages, or you can go to BibleWithGateway.com to read the Bible for free. If we want to see that the way that the Bible would be printed in a physical paper book, the order of the chapters in the Bible, we can go on here to read the Bible, available versions. Pick any version that you like, any language that you like, and within any language, any version that you like. I read English. Pick any one of these. Folks talk about, there's different versions of the Bible. There's different translations of the Bible. But that's a feature, not a bug. That's a good thing. You can Christians don't fight over you've got the wrong Bible. Christians fight over what does the Bible mean, but we don't fight over you've got the wrong Bible. Pick whichever one I don't care. They all say the same thing. So pick whichever one you like. I'm not a Catholic, but if you pick a Catholic Bible, great. I'm not Eastern Orthodox, but if you pick an Eastern Orthodox Bible, great. The message of the Bible is consistent. Pick a translation that makes sense to you in your native language. So in English, ESV is a good version. Whatever. But what we find is that the first book of the Bible, and by the way, if you're not familiar, the Christian Bible is just the Jewish Bible plus the parts that happen after Jesus and onward. So Christians read the Jewish Bible, the Torah, Zabur, The Jewish scriptures are the first 3/4 of our Bible, and then the last fourth is the Jesus part. But we don't say that the Torah is for the Jews. No, we read the Jewish scriptures as the first part of our Bible, and then the Jesus part. So the very first book of the Bible, of the Christian Bible, and the very first book of the Jewish Bible is called Genesis, Bereshit in Hebrew, meaning in the beginning. And we go to the very first chapter of the very first book, and we can start reading it like we would read a book, because it begins in the beginning. Quite literally, that's the first phrase. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was out without form and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And we move forward through the days of creation, separating the waters above and the waters below, separating the dry land from the seas, the beginning of plants, the beginning of stars, moon, and sun, the beginning of animals in the sky and fish in the sea, and mankind, the creation of mankind. Very next chapter, we move to the Garden of Eden. And we've got the Garden of Eden. This is one cohesive story from creation to garden. God gives man the instructions, what trees they should eat from, what the one tree they should not eat from. God creates Eve, Hava, Adam's wife, and gives her to him as a wife. Move on to Genesis 3. We're still in the Garden of Eden. We're in the original story, and it continues where Adam and Eve disobeyed God's command and ate from the tree that they weren't supposed to eat from, and they realized they were naked, and they tried to cover themselves, and God cursed the ground because of them, and cursed the snake, and made coverings for them, and sent them out of the garden. The very next chapter is Adam and Eve had children. It's a story of Cain and Abel, their two sons. Very next chapter, it's a genealogical descent from Adam and his son down through the generations down to Noah. Very next chapter is the whole story. Now we've got 3 chapters, Genesis 6 through 9. 3 chapters telling us the full story of Noah and the flood and the ark that rescued Noah and his family. And we keep on going this way. And here's we've got a summary right here of the outline. Genesis keeps on going to from after the flood, the Tower of Babel, the call of Ibrahim, and then you've got several chapters that tell. You've got multiple chapters. You've got 13 chapters telling the story, the full story of the life of Ibrahim and Sarah. Then you've got a few chapters telling Isaac, the son of Ibrahim and Sarah. Then you've got a few chapters telling about Jacob, also known as Israel, the son of Isaac. And then Jacob has 12 sons, and you have the story of his sons, and especially Joseph and the descent of the sons of Israel down into slavery in Egypt. Go to the next book, and Exodus is the story of the children of Israel in slavery in Egypt, and God setting them free. Moses comes and demonstrates the plagues to Moses, and the Passover. The Jews put the blood of the lamb on their door, and the angel of death passes over their house, again foreshadowing the need of a sacrifice for forgiveness of sins and for redemption and eternal life. They go they're freed into the wilderness. God gives them the law, and the story just proceeds on down chronologically. Leviticus, God gives the law to the priests while they are after they've built the temple in the wilderness. Numbers is Israel tells the story of Israel wandering through the wilderness because they disobeyed and they weren't able to enter the promised land. Deuteronomy repeats the laws that God gave to Moses at Sinai and prepares them to enter the promised land. Then in Joshua, they do enter the promised land. Judges is the next book in the chronology of the story of Israel in the land of Canaan. And then Ruth is the great grandmother of King David. And then the prophets of the prophet Samuel, and the days of the prophets begin before the kings. King David comes along, and then his son Solomon, and we have all the kings of Israel. It's a nice chronological story. Similarly, in the New Testament, the Injil of Jesus, go to the first page of the gospel, and we have the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, son of Abraham. So we have the genealogy of Jesus from Abraham to the Christ, and then the story of his birth and his mother, the Virgin Mary, and Joseph going down to Egypt, and where Jesus was born, and then the early days of them coming back to Israel after they leave Egypt. And then Yahya, John the Baptist, comes along preparing the way for Jesus. And then Jesus is tested by the Satan in the wilderness, and Jesus begins his public preaching ministry with the Sermon on the Mount. Again, you go through chronologically, and you've got 28 chapters. It's a full biography, and it reads like a biography would from the very beginning of Jesus' life, through the start of his ministry, through the various things he did and taught, and then when you get to the end of the book, it tells of the plot to kill Jesus, his death on the cross, and his resurrection. It ends up where you would, the last two chapters end up where a story would be expected to end up at the end. Jesus is crucified on the cross, and then he's resurrected, and he commissions his disciples to go and proclaim his message to the ends of the earth. Keep on going through the New Testament. You have the letters the apostles wrote to the churches, and then you get to the end, and the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, is the very end of the story, and it tells of what will happen up until the time when Christ returns. You get to the very last chapters of the book of Revelation, so the last chapters of the Christian Bible, and it's the end of the world. Just like the first few chapters of the Bible were the story of the beginning of the world, the last couple chapters of the Bible are the very end of the world. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard the loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. God will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain. We go to the very last chapter of the Bible, and we see the angel showed me, this is John the Apostle, seeing a vision of the world to come, a river with the water of life flowing from the throne of God and from the Lamb through the middle of the street. On either side of the river was the tree of life. This is a return to the Edenic paradise where Adam and Eve began. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. There's nothing more accursed. The curse from the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, has been undone by the power of Jesus Christ conquering over death. They will see the face of God, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. So the story of the Bible begins at the very beginning and ends at the very end, and in between it tells the story of what happens in between. So it is an actual book, what we would expect of a book that you can read from cover to cover, starting at the beginning of the story, going through the middle of the story, and ending at the end of the story. Let's call that the miracle of the Bible, is that it's a book that you can read as a book and get a full story arc. Now, if someone can explain to me the divine wisdom of the way in which the Quran is compiled together, I'm willing to listen. But just being honest with you, my testimony reading the Quran for myself, my impression is that it's a hodgepodge thrown together. The surahs are arranged in a hodgepodge. The only structure there is longer ones to shorter ones, but that doesn't teach me much about following Allah. And the within the surahs themselves, it's very much a hodgepodge of jumping from a few verses about Miriam to a few verses about Dawood to a few verses about Adam uh, to the warnings, Muhammad giving warnings against the polytheists and the idolaters that judgment is coming, and I don't see a development of ideas. I don't see a storyline. I don't see any kind of cohesive structure that makes this a book that impresses me with the wisdom of the author that put it together. Another big picture issue that I run into with the claim that the Quran is the final compact revelation, end all revelation from God that doesn't require any other scriptures to supplement it. And I like looking at the big picture because I don't so much want to quibble over a single verse here and a single verse there. At least not until we have the until I can make sense out of the big picture. Um, but the other issue is the context of all of these stories. As I say, a little bit about Miriam here, a little bit about Dawood there, a little bit about Ibrahim there. Now, it may never have struck you if you were born and raised as a Muslim and you've been hearing various pieces of these stories at the mosque and at home and being madrasa and coming together at different times and places. But imagine just that you're just an alien dropped out from Mars and you just read the Quran by itself. You don't have hadith, you don't have tafsir, you don't have any oral tradition or stories that you've heard from your family. All you have is the Quran. Who are these people? This Maryam, this Isa, this Dawood, this Suleiman. Who are these people that are popping in and out of the stories nowhere? And again, this is one case where I think Muhammad expected the Muslims to go and talk to Ahl Kitab, the people of the book, and ask them because they knew the people of the book knew the scriptures that could come before, and all of these stories are based on a rich background. As I say in the Bible, you'll have let's go to Genesis. You'll have 3 chapters about Adam and the garden. You'll have 4 chapters. I think I said 3 last time, actually 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 about Noah. You'll have some 13, 14 chapters about Ibrahim. You've got, look at right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters at least about Yaqub. You've got another, what are these ads? Another 20 chapters, 15 chapters about Joseph and the 12 tribes of Israel. You've got 19 chapters about Moses and the sons of Israel coming out of Egypt before you start getting into the law. You've got a whole book about the prophet Joshua and his conquest of the land of Canaan. You've got a whole book, 2 Samuel, about David. You've got a good 11 chapters about Suleiman. You've got who else would we know from a Islamic background? Jonah. You got 4 chapters about Jonah. Jesus. You've got 28 plus 16 plus 24 plus 21 chapters. You got a whole bunch of. You got some 60 chapters or 80 chapters there about the life of Jesus. A lot of background about the life of Jesus. And so when these characters are popping in and out of the Quran, that's able to happen, because the stories were well established. People were talking about them throughout the Middle East, including the Arabian Peninsula at the time of Muhammad, because these were the well established stories that go on for chapter after chapter with rich character development, telling the full biography of these prophets and patriarchs, these men and women of the scripture. You have their full biography in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, and so people were talking about it, and so Muhammad could come along and tell the early Muslims, okay, remember what we've told you about Zechariah. Remember what you know about Elijah or Saul or whatnot, because the background was already established. But again, read the Quran with a blank slate mind, no hadith, no tafsir, no knowledge of other stories, just an alien blank mind, and the the Quran is a island swimming in a sea of chaos. There's no background for what's going on here. Who are all these characters and how do they all fit together? Because again, there's no overall meta story arc tying the Quran together. So the Quran does not strike me as the piece of work of a single divine mind that was intending to reveal the stories of the prophets and to give a standalone book that on its own would tell you everything you need, which again, that's why Muhammad repeatedly called the early Muslims to go and talk to the people of the book, because they have the background for these stories. Even the even the Quran's claims for itself, I don't think are what modern Muslims claim. That the Quran was the completion of the scriptures that came before, but was never intended to stand alone, because all of the background is found in the Jewish and Christian scriptures. And what in particular is remarkable, as long as I'm speaking about a divine mind with a divine plan to put a story together, what's another miracle of the Bible is that you have multiple different authors over multiple different centuries, millennia. Moses wrote the Torah. You have different prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. Um, David wrote the Psalms. Suleiman wrote most of the Proverbs. Um, you have the followers of Jesus who wrote the biography of his life and the letters to the churches, and the apostles who had the Apostle John who had the vision of the end times. All this is all the way from the time of Moses, some um, 1,500 years before Jesus, up until generation after the death of Jesus. Multiple different authors with one combined story arc that all fits together into a cohesive whole that tells the story of the universe from the beginning through all the prophets and people of God, through the life of Jesus, the Son of God, and his death and resurrection, up until the creation of the new heavens and the new earth. And it all fits together as the work of multiple different human authors, inspired by one divine mind that put it all together to make a cohesive whole, because every one of the individual human authors only contributed one small piece of the puzzle, but the whole thing fits together to make a mosaic puzzle, one consistent picture that was put only makes sense as a divine mind put all the inspired the different authors to put together one whole book. So then the next step is that I ask my Muslim friends or look at online resources to try to get some guidance as to what miracles I'm supposed to be seeing in the Quran, because just as an ordinary person reading through, nothing strikes me as particularly extraordinary. Not only am I not blown away that, oh, this is a miraculous book, a divinely inspired book? But this isn't even a particularly interesting book or well structured book or something that I worth reading again. There's no development of ideas or storyline from beginning to end. There's some snippets of stories here and there that are hard to fit together, and a lot of warnings about God will judge the polytheists and the idolaters, but nothing that strikes me as this is the as a anything that would qualify as a miracle. Um, and so I asked my friends, and of course, one of the common discussion points in modern Christian Islamic discourse is the so-called miracles, scientific miracles of the Quran. I remember reading the Bible, the Quran, and Science several years ago. Maurice Buchal's book was kind of launched the scientific miracles movement, and the one that struck me most, and kind of just as indicative of how I felt about a lot of the alleged miracles, was the water cycle one. Because when you read Maurice Buchal's, description of what ancient people thought about the water cycle versus what people think nowadays, and how the Quran gets it right, and who could have ever known that, or if you listen to Zakir Naik on YouTube videos giving the same sort of thing, it's oh wow, that's impressive. And it sounds like some incredible foresight into things that weren't properly understood in the future, and Muhammad had this revelatory insight. But if I say, okay, I'm a data guy, I don't want to hear all of your discussion. Just show me the Quran verses that you're working off of, and I want to see the raw data that we're working with here, not your explanation of it all. And when we do that, it's not that the surahs say anything wrong, so much as just nothing impressive. It's ordinary observations that, by the way, I think are meant to be ordinary observations. They weren't meant to be presented as scientific miracles, which is why there are some Muslim theologians who push back against this modern movement as a modern innovation, and say that folks are abusing the what has been the traditional interpretation of the Quranic verses. But I'll get to that in a minute. So, Surah 50, verse 9, we sent down from the sky blessed water. Now, a lot of these verses, that's the main thing you hear in a lot of these verses, is we sent down water from the sky. We cause water to descend from the sky. Over and over again, these verses are saying water comes down from the sky. Guess what, guys? From the dawn of time, people have walked outside and seen rain. Um, in fact, uh, then thou seest raindrops issuing from the clouds. The verse, chapter 30 itself, the Quran is pointing out that the stuff that we're talking about here is stuff that you see with your eyes. You see the raindrops coming from the sky. So back up to here. We sent down from the sky blessed water. It rains, whereby we cause to grow gardens, grains for our harvest, tall palm trees with their spathes piled one above the other, sustenance for our servants. Therewith we gave new life to a dead land. So will be the emergence from the tombs. It rains, what the verse is saying, it rains, and then the wilted plants, show new signs of life. This is observable with the naked eye. Now, Zakir Naik and Maurice Buchal can put an explanation on it that make it sound like ancient people didn't know all of this stuff until Muhammad came along. But when I read the verse itself, I'm pretty sure people in Arabia could have walked out their door and seen that it rains, and when it does, the plants, get invigorated with new life. And in fact, I think that the verse itself support, in addition to the one that we saw down here about you see the raindrops you see them with your eyes. That's what the Quran is saying. But even our verse Surah, 50 up here, it's teaching a spiritual lesson. Just as the rains come down and give new life to the plants, it's a form of life from the dead, so will be the emergence from the tombs. It's a parable about resurrection, about the afterlife, that the dead will rise, just as rain comes down and the dead plants rise. Um, so you can have hope in the emergence from the tombs of the dead. Those who are the faithful of Allah will be raised to a new life. The logic, the spiritual logic of the verse is contingent on the fact that he's describing a meteorological phenomena that the people are familiar with. You can understand that your body will raise from the dead because you've walked out the door and you've seen plants come back to life when the rain comes down. This is meant to be a parable. It's meant to encourage you because it's based on something that you know, based on something that you already can see, not something from new scientific, revelation embedded in the Quran that won't be understood for over 1,000 years. And so that's just indicative of, how I feel with all of these scientific miracles is anything from lots of ordinary stuff to stuff that might be mildly interesting. Maybe the shape of the embryo in the womb looking like a piece of gum is maybe mildly interesting. Maybe the percentage of water to land on the earth, if that matches the ratio of the word times the word water and land occur in the Quran, that might be neat. But look, if we're going to use the word miracle, there's some pretty remarkable things that happen in this world. I mean, running a sub 4 minute mile, running a sub 5 minute mile for a marathon. I can't run a sub 5 minute, can't run a sub 7 minute mile. 7.5 is about the best I could do. I could do a little better than that if I pushed it. But I'm not running a sub 5 minute mile, certainly not for 26 miles. You got these guys running a whole marathon at a pace that I wouldn't want to run a single lap around the track. Now that's amazing. That's jaw dropping. But the world is full of jaw-dropping stuff. There's guys doing in the NBA doing a slam dunk into a basket, hoop I could never get quarter of the way there. There certainly is giftings in the world, and that giftings do come from God, where people can write poetry I never could have written, can do scientific discoveries that I never could have made, can do athletic ventures that I never could have imagined making, and it's amazing and it's awe-inspiring and it's jaw-dropping. But I wouldn't describe the word miracle as if supernatural, surpassing the bounds of natural. I mean, these guys, run fast. It's partly in their genetics and partly due to intensive training. You can do some pretty amazing things with the body. With enough study, you can do some pretty amazing things with the mind. Then the very the 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 greatest alleged miracles in the Quran at best strike me at the level of, well, that's pretty neat. I may not have come up with that. Um but nothing, blow me away, uh, amazing, miraculous, and the vast majority of it is ordinary stuff observable with the naked eye that, as I showed in that example, it was supposed to be observable to the naked eye. Muhammad was describing things. He wanted the people to understand the thing that he was saying. That there wasn't a hidden message that you have to understand 21st century science and technology to get the point. The point was, you look outside when it rains and you see that the plants rise up. This is teaching you a lesson, a spiritual lesson based on what you can see. Oh, there, fix the color. Sorry about the weird background colors in the last segment of the video. I accidentally tapped a button on my camera. We've got that fixed. But this idea of the um the alleged miracles of the Quran not nearly being as anywhere near as impressive as they are hyped up to be, was presented to me. They really stuck out to me even more starkly than I'd ever been able to put it myself, by a young Turkish man in Iznik, Turkey, um, a year or so ago. Now he was culturally Muslim from a Muslim background, but most of the young, educated Turks and Iranians who I talked to, the college educated, English speaking um, young folks in Turkey and Iran are uh, vast majority are done with religion. They don't follow Islam. They don't follow any religion. They think religion in general is holding their societies back. And this man was a case in point. But what what he said to me was, this Quran is claimed to be the culmination of all of human history. Some 124,000 prophets. God has sent a prophet to every um every nation, every ethnic group of people throughout history. And the Quran is alleged to be the apex, the 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 climax, the fulfillment of all of these, the greatest miracle of all time, the the culmination of all the scriptures that supersedes everything and is the final revelation of God, the final word of God. And he says, and he said with a little smirk on his face, and this is what God came up with. I mean, with all of that effort, this is the best that he could do. It is very, I gotta say, guys, again, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's the hype that my Muslim friends ascribe to how great and glorious the miraculous Quran is versus what I find when I actually look at it, it's anticlimactic. Um, if God was looking to, again, Muhammad or Muslims readily acknowledge that Muhammad did not do the type of miracles that Jesus and some of the other prophets did. He didn't raise the dead. He didn't heal miraculously, heal the sick, or cast out demons, or heal lepers. Muhammad's sole miracle is vested in the Quran. This is the miracle that the whole religion is resting on, and this is the climax of the history of Revelation. And it's like, um, what again is the miracle here, that um water comes down from the sky, or what that the way that the sounds sound beautiful in Arabic. I've heard recitation of the Quran. Again, it's okay. I'm not saying that it's bad sounding necessarily, but I mean, there's a lot of beautiful music and poetry in the world, and honestly, nothing special, nothing comes across really um remarkable to me here. And so if this Quran is the grand climax of what God gave to verify the prophethood of Muhammad, I gotta say, guys, I care about the eternal condition of my own soul. Look, I don't want to burn in hellfire forever. And so if I'm looking for a reliable guide to show me the will of God and how to avoid hellfire and enter paradise, I can't entrust I cannot entrust my soul to this book. There's nothing that gives me assurance that my soul, my eternal soul, which is precious to me, will be safe if I entrust it to this book that's really nothing special. And I don't think that you should entrust the eternal well-being of your soul to this book either. I counsel you, I would advise you, my testimony would be to seriously reconsider if this book really is so off the charts amazing as the hype it's given to be, or if there's some other reason why it's given all that hype. Because honestly, I talk to a lot of Muslims who tell me how incredibly amazing, what a miraculous miracle the Quran is. And then I ask them some questions about it, and they admit they've never read the Quran. And I wonder, how do you know it's a great miracle if you've never read it? And it becomes clear that this idea that the Quran is an amazing miracle is passed on from one person to the next, and it's what in Islamic culture, it's what you have to say, it's just the thing that you say. And again, there's a culture of fear surrounding any, better not say anything to the contrary or even consider thinking anything to the contrary. And so is it so much that people have been persuaded that wowzers of wowzers, this book is a blow me away miracle, or is it just this is what you say as a Muslim, and in fact there will be consequences if you say anything contrary, or you say anything negative. Um, because the threats, the death threats, the all of the sharp pushback when anything negative comes up about the Quran is again a testimony to me of it's a testimony that there's something wrong here. Because say that I go to a restaurant, and have a meal, and the chef or the owner comes out after I'm done with the meal and says, are you going to give us a 5-star review? And I say, I mean, the food was okay. And he pulls out a gun and says, you're going to give a 5-star review. Can you can you trust you go back and you look, this restaurant has a bunch of 5-star reviews. If people's lives have to be threatened in order to say great things about the Quran, if a restaurant is really amazing, people will voluntarily give it 5-star reviews. There doesn't have to be external pressure applied. And so when I see severe threatening pressure that you have to say positive things and not negative things, and indeed your life is in danger if you say negative things about the uh, the Quran, um, something that is as impressive as the Quran is hyped up to be, if it is such an amazing miracle, let it speak for itself. Let people read it and come to their own conclusions. And if someone like me says I'm just not that impressed, let the next guy, and if it really is a great miracle, then okay, let the next guy read it for himself and form his own impression. But if the rating of the restaurant has to be bolstered with an atmosphere of fear, that this is what you have to say, or culture pressure that this is what you're supposed to say, then it dilutes the validity of all of those testimonies, if you're just saying it because that's what you have to say. So for my part, I testify I've read the Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures, and the Islamic scriptures, and I'm genuinely impressed with the Jewish and the Christian scriptures. I commend them to your consideration and pray that you would indeed have a look.